Welcome again to Inside the Future. Imagine authorizing a multi-million-dollar investment in, like, the ultimate corporate collaboration tool. You roll it out to your entire executive team, and then you just watch in horror as they completely stop talking to each other.
Right. I mean, it sounds like a bad joke, but that is actually the bizarre psychological shift happening in boardrooms right now.
It's wild. So we're doing a deep dive today into this fascinating internal research brief.
Yeah, and it synthesizes a mountain of incredibly fresh 2026 data. We're talking heavy hitters here.
Exactly. We've got data from BCG, Deloitte, MIT Sloan.
Grant Thornton, Fourth Rev, and Forbes, too.
Right. It's a massive aggregation. And our mission today, well, instead of the usual tired talking points about how AI is going to, change the way we write emails, we're looking at the structural reality at the very top of the corporate ladder.
The human cost of these systems.
Yeah, exactly. Why the most expensive leadership teams on the planet are suddenly retreating into these isolated silos, and how a tiny fraction of companies are actually tearing down their entire organizational charts to fix it.
And that isolation aspect, that is what truly leaps off the page in this research. Because the logical expectation for any CEO right now is that a shared, hyper-intelligent data system would, act as a unifying force.
Right, you'd think so. You put better data on the table, you get better, more collaborative debates.
Exactly. But the numbers from 2026 paint the exact opposite picture. Right now, companies are massively ramping up their capital allocation for this tech. We are talking about doubling spending in a single year.
Wow.
Yeah, jumping from roughly 0.8% of total revenue to 1.7%.
I mean, that is a staggering amount of cash to inject into operations all at once.
It is a massive bet. And alongside that bet, roughly 3 out of 4 CEOs now consider themselves the primary decision maker on the overall AI strategy.
Okay, so they're taking the wheel.
They are. But here is the friction point. A large, growing share of these exact same leaders are quietly reporting in these surveys that their executive decision-making has actually become significantly less collaborative since they adopted these systems.
Wait, so they buy the ultimate centralized intelligence tool and they retreat to their separate corners.
Yeah.
Why? I mean, are they just intimidated by the math?
It goes a lot deeper than intimidation. It's a fundamental shift in how highly experienced professionals perceive their own authority.
Interesting.
Yeah, a majority of these leaders admit that they actively second-guess their own, hard-won judgment whenever the system's output disagrees with their personal read of a situation.
Oh, wow.
So think about a chief marketing officer with 20 years of experience. They look at a market trend, and their gut tells them a certain product launch is going to fail because of, say, shifting consumer sentiment.
Right, they know the market.
Exactly. But the algorithmic model outputs an 85% probability of success based on historical data.
And that executive just freezes.
They completely freeze. The system is suddenly perceived as this infallible oracle.
And defying an oracle feels incredibly risky.
Especially when the board of directors knows you just spent $20 million on it. If you bet against the machine and you're wrong, you look completely reckless.
Oh, totally. But if you follow the machine and it's wrong, you could just blame the software.
Precisely. So instead of bringing that conflicting data to their peers to debate the nuance, they just retreat. They try to figure out how to, align their strategy with machine's output in isolation.
That reminds me of, well, it's like driving with a hyper-confident GPS system.
Whoa, yeah. That's a good way to look at it.
You could be driving in your own hometown, a neighborhood you know intimately. You know every single pothole. You know which intersections flood when it rains.
You know the local shortcuts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the second that screen on your dashboard tells you to turn left into a wall of traffic, you doubt yourself.
You second-guess your own eyes.
Right. You think, maybe there's a satellite viewing an accident I don't know about. And you just stop asking the passengers in your car for their opinion.
You just quietly follow the screen.
Even if you end up stuck on a bridge for 2 hours.
Yeah, that captures the dynamic perfectly. And when you scale that GPS analogy up to a Fortune 500 boardroom, the consequences are severe because a leadership team's primary strength has always been diverse perspectives.
Right.
You want that natural friction between, say, a chief financial officer who's obsessed with caution and cost cutting and a chief technology officer who wants rapid, aggressive innovation.
But if they're both just asking the same model for the answer, that friction dies.
Exactly.
Doesn't that completely defeat the purpose of paying for a diverse leadership team in the first place? I mean, if the algorithm is the ultimate arbiter in the room, the human experts sitting next to each other just become redundant.
Redundant and incredibly isolated. The model becomes their new partner. We are seeing executives manage their own siloed interactions with the system, trying to optimize their own department's metrics rather than forging a messy collective strategy with the actual humans across the hall.
So if you're listening to this and you lead a team, or even if you just manage your own workflow, I want you to think about the last time you let a software prompt or a data output overrule your own instinct.
It happens more often than people admit.
It really does.
Yeah.
Did you pause and talk to a colleague about that discrepancy, or did you just quietly accept the prompt and move on? It's a very subtle behavioral shift, but it changes the entire dynamic of how we work together.
And that subtle behavioral shift at the top bleeds downward very quickly. Because if the leaders are retreating into silos and second-guessing themselves, it naturally corrupts how they prepare the rest of the workforce.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and this research points out a massive disconnect in training and readiness. It creates what looks like an alignment illusion.
An alignment illusion, meaning the C-suite thinks everybody is marching in the same direction, but the people actually doing the marching are just like walking into walls.
You hit the nail on the head. A large majority of executives will confidently state on surveys that they provide AI training to their employees.
Right. They check the box.
Exactly. But when the researchers actually look at the workforce, fewer than half of companies have anything resembling a mature, organization-wide upskilling program. The training that does exist is highly fragmented.
Oh, I have seen this firsthand. The training usually looks like an hour-long seminar explaining what a neural network is.
Yeah.
Or a high-level presentation on how large language models predict the next word in a sentence. It's totally theoretical.
Which is completely useless to a procurement manager who needs to know how to evaluate a complex vendor contract using the new assistant tool.
Right.
And the reason this training is so disconnected from reality stems directly from a major fracture within the C-suite itself. The data shows that technology leaders, the CIOs and CTOs, are highly confident that their workforce is ready to integrate these systems.
Interesting. Why is that?
Well, they look at the software, they see the clean user interface, and they assume adoption is just a matter of logging in and typing a prompt.
Because their job is the deployment. They see the API working, the data flowing, and they're like, all right, we're good to go.
But the operations leaders, the COOs, the people managing the daily friction of actual human beings doing the work, they're highly skeptical.
Huh?
They're looking at the realities of the floor. They see employees who are already overwhelmed by 3 other software transitions this year, who don't trust the new outputs, and who are, frankly, terrified of making a compliance mistake.
Let's play that out, because buying the tool is really the easy part. You just sign a check.
Right.
But if I'm a mid-level manager sitting somewhere in the middle of that corporate ladder, and my CTO is sending out enthusiastic memos demanding that my department automate 50% of our reporting by Q3.
Yeah, aggressive targets.
But my direct boss, the COO, is quietly demanding that I maintain traditional manual risk compliance checks because they don't trust the technology yet. I'm completely paralyzed.
Paralysis is the exact result. And that paralysis is incredibly expensive. It destroys trust across the organization.
I can imagine.
The frontline employees look upward for a coherent, unified strategy, and instead, they get mixed signals born from that C-suite divide. And this brings us to perhaps the most jarring statistic in the entire maybe brief.
Lay it on me.
Because of this executive misalignment, the fragmented training, and the isolated decision-making, the vast majority of companies are failing to get any real return on their investment. Right now, only about 1 in 5 companies is actually capturing the economic value of these systems.
Wait, 1 in 5. That means 80% of these companies are just setting piles of money on fire.
Pretty much, yeah.
They're spinning their wheels, creating all this anxiety for their employees, and getting nothing for it.
Exactly.
So let's look at the winners. If 20% are actually making money, saving time, and pulling ahead, they must be fundamentally resolving that divide. What are they doing differently? And I'm guessing it's not just that they bought a more expensive software package.
No, it has almost nothing to do with the specific software they purchase. The key differentiator for that top 20% is that leadership fundamentally redesigned their operating model around the technology.
Okay, what does that mean?
They looked at their legacy workflows and realized that just digitizing their existing bad habits wasn't going to work.
What does that actually look like in practice, though? When you say they redesigned their operating model, it sounds a bit like, management consulting speak. Do you mean they're just changing who reports to who?
It goes much deeper than the reporting structure. Let's look at a concrete example. Most companies in that 80% category practice what we can call bolting it on.
Bolting it on.
Right. They take an existing, clunky 15-step supply chain review process. They keep all 15 manual steps, but they add a 16th step at the end where a new AI tool writes a neat little summary of the final report.
Which doesn't actually change the work at all. It just adds a digital bell to an analog process. It might even add more time because now someone has to proofread the AI summary.
Precisely the problem. The top 20%, the company's actually capturing value, they are embedding the technology. They tear that 15-step process down to the studs.
Wow.
They eliminate the concept of an employee manually gathering data for 2 weeks. Instead, the system instantly generates the initial data synthesis and predictive modeling. And then the human workflow is entirely redesigned around auditing that model.
So their job changes completely.
Yes, they're injecting local context, challenging the assumptions, and strategizing based on the output. They literally rewrite the job descriptions. A role that used to be inventory forecaster becomes strategic variance auditor.
That is a massive shift because I hear so many leaders at conferences bragging about their new AI pilot program.
Right, everybody has a pilot program.
And it always looks fantastic on a slide deck. But if you walk up to them afterward and ask them to show you an actual org chart that changed or a specific decision right that was moved from a human to a machine, they usually come up completely empty.
Because changing a process is terrifying. It's much safer to just buy software and cross your fingers, hoping the magic happens organically.
Yeah.
But the successful companies go a step further. They aren't just using off-the-shelf tools. They are customizing these models to their specific business realities.
Oh, so?
They take a baseline model and aggressively train it on a decade of their own proprietary failures, their own customer service transcripts, and their own supply chain bottlenecks.
So the model isn't just smart about the internet in general. It's smart about their specific company.
Yes. And most importantly, they deliberately build a hybrid workflow that explicitly pairs human and machine judgment. They draw a very hard, legalistic line between an AI-assisted decision and an AI-made decision that a human simply signed off on.
Let's dig into that distinction, actually, because if the 20% are successfully pairing human and machine judgment, it forces us to ask the ultimate question. What exactly is the human supposed to be doing?
Right.
If the machine is doing all the heavy cognitive lifting, if it's synthesizing millions of data points, mapping the supply chain, predicting the market variance, why do we still need the highly paid executive sitting in the corner office?
It is the existential question for modern leadership, and synthesizing the insights from MIT Sloan, Forbes, and the rest of our sources, a very clear, perhaps surprising picture emerges.
Okay.
AI does not replace a leader's judgment. It exponentially raises the price of having it.
I want to make sure I really grasp this. The technology introduces a scale and speed we have never seen before.
Yeah.
Let's use an analogy here. The AI is like a high-powered sonar system on a nuclear submarine.
Okay, I like that.
It can perfectly map the ocean floor ahead of you. It can calculate the exact depth, the water pressure, and mathematically pinpoint every single physical obstacle in the dark.
Right. Perfect visibility.
But the sonar has absolutely no idea what the mission is.
Oh, yeah. It doesn't know why the submarine is even in the water.
Exactly. It doesn't know if engaging a target in those waters violates international treaties or goes against the ethical code of the nation it represents. The sonar provides perfect clarity on the what, but it is completely blind to the why and the should.
That is a phenomenal way to look at it, because these systems introduce unprecedented levels of ambiguity precisely because they give you so many viable options.
Right.
An algorithm can give a CEO 3 different strategic scenarios for a global market expansion, and all 3 will be mathematically sound and financially modeled to perfection.
But the algorithm doesn't know the company's historical risk tolerance.
It doesn't know your culture. It doesn't understand the psychological implications of laying off a beloved legacy division just to fund that new market expansion.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to stand on a stage at a town hall meeting and look the surviving employees in the eye to explain why the decision was made.
Which means the leaders who are pulling ahead, the ones driving that 20%, are aggressively sharpening the skills that an algorithm simply cannot replicate.
Yes.
We're talking about setting organizational direction, deciding not just how to do something with maximum efficiency, but whether it should be done at all.
We're talking about making values-based judgment calls under extreme high-speed pressure. And crucially, it's about building trust.
Trust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to build enough social and emotional capital with your employees that they will follow your decision, even when they don't fully understand the complex algorithmic model operating behind the scenes. In an organization driven by opaque data systems, human trust becomes the ultimate premium currency.
Because if the employees don't trust the leader, they will never trust the tool the leader is forcing them to use.
Precisely. And the transition to that kind of leadership requires a level of self-awareness that's actually quite rare in corporate environments.
I bet.
Go back to that moment we discussed earlier where a leader admits they second-guessed themselves against the machine. That is the crucible. Do they surrender their judgment to the oracle, or do they interrogate the machine?
Right.
The companies that are succeeding actually train their executives to interrogate the system. They teach them that disagreeing with the model isn't a failure to adopt the new technology. It is the very essence of their job description.
Wow. That completely flips the script on what training should look like. We shouldn't just be teaching middle managers how to write more efficient prompts. We should be teaching them how to confidently, aggressively disagree with a perfectly formatted, highly confident, statistically probable output.
It requires cultivating a culture of intense, healthy skepticism. If your operations leaders are skeptical of the new rollout, as the data shows they are, you don't dismiss them as laggards who are afraid of the future.
Right. You don't sideline them.
You bring them into the room with the technology optimists, and you use that operational friction to build a more robust, customized workflow. You harness the human skepticism to pressure test the machine. That is what true collaborative decision-making looks like in this new era. You don't collaborate with the machine. You use the machine to drive deeper collaboration among the humans.
If you're listening right now, I highly recommend looking at your own daily workflow through this lens. What is a judgment call you made recently, whether it was dealing with a difficult client, managing a conflict between two teammates, or just deciding to delay a project because it didn't feel right that no system could have made for you?
It's a great exercise.
Think about the specific nuance involved in that moment.
Okay.
Was it empathy? Was it a moral line you refused to cross? Was it an unwritten understanding of your company's culture? Whatever that element was, that right there is your premium skill. That is the steering wheel.
And realizing that is the only way to separate the leaders who are ultimately managed by their technology from the leaders who actually master it.
Well, we have covered incredible ground today. We started by looking at the bizarre reality of how these connecting tools are actually driving executives into isolated silos, totally terrified of disagreeing with the algorithmic oracle. We broke down the massive divide in the C-suite, with tech leaders and ops leaders living in entirely different realities regarding their team's readiness. We moved past the 80% of companies that are just setting money on fire by bolting technology onto bad processes.
We're routing it on.
Right. And we looked at the 1 in 5 who are actively redesigning their workflows. And finally, we landed on the reality that in a world of infinite, instant data, your core human judgment, your ability to steer with ethics, values, and trust is the most valuable asset in the building.
And, if we follow that trajectory to its logical conclusion, it leaves us with a fascinating prospect. Yeah, if the technology eventually handles all the complex data crunching, all the predictive logistics, and all the structural mapping, and if the core of human leadership becomes purely about ethics, values, and building trust, will the most effective CEOs of the future need to look more like philosophers than technologists.
Now, a boardroom full of philosophers. That's a wild mental image to leave on. Stay tuned for our next episode.